that is one of the interesting discoveries. When you will see in the exhibition that, right, for example, right now, the Nyonya Kebaya, we call Kebaya Sulam, it's just sewing machine lathe and cut work. But when you look back over the 100 years, in fact, there was such a huge variation of sewing techniques and other materials, say net, applique work. There were also kebayas in silk, linen, and right now, in fact, it's sort of rather restricted. It was much more creative, and hopefully this exhibition will inspire new designers or new kebaya makers to experiment much more with other sewing techniques.
Any other questions? What?
I just want to ask, we know that kebaya, apart from the Peranakan community that wears kebaya, the Malay community is also a major community that wears kebaya, the Malay women. I was just wondering, where the Malay element from your own research has any influence on the design of kebaya or something like that?
Yeah, actually this is one of the other interesting sort of sub-themes coming up, because well, it is sort of the national costume of Indonesia, Malaysia. Of course, and each community has a certain different style. The exhibition focuses mainly on the evolution of what we understand as Nyonya Kebaya. One of the key points is that basically until the late 19th century, so age of nationalism, in a sense everybody was Peranakan. In the sense that communities were all very, very cross-cultural, and that makes it difficult to actually pinpoint differences. Which is the Malay element, which is the Chinese element, what was European. Actually, everybody lived very, shared all these elements and embraced all these things. I think retreating into national boundaries is a fairly modern phenomenon. In fact, it's time for everyone to sort of rediscover their inner Peranakan, and see that it actually was a fairly common process. So in fact, I'm sort of trying to encourage people to sort of look less to what was separate, but and I think that brings to another point about this approach, because generally, even for the Peranakans themselves, I mean, there's this sort of paradox or contradiction in the sense that we like to think of ourselves as being uniquely Peranakan, which is a contradiction, and the emphasis has been to show what is different about being Peranakan, rather than what ties Peranakans to all communities. And I think, personally, I'm much more for drawing in different elements and pulling them all together, rather than to say this is what and that's what. And I think basically it was something worn by everyone. Whether you're European, Malay, Japanese, or Chinese, we all dress the same way, ate almost the same food, and it was just a wonderful melting pot.
I would emphasize that the sources too. The idea that you can pin something down is sometimes an illusion. Sometimes you identify a certain component as being Dutch, but then it has an even earlier source in the lace of other countries, even to take the lace kebaya or the kebaya itself. I mean, is it Malay or Indonesian or Japanese? Well, no, it's actually from the Islamic world earlier. And of course, it may have antecedents in Central Asia before that. We didn't even go that far, right? I mean, it's a way of drawing the whole thing together. And I'm fascinated by this activity, and I think it's a wonderful way of looking at the world. Not to be too Pollyannish about it, but it's a nice way of trying to dissect these old categories.
Are there any more questions?
Hi, good morning. I'm Mitchell from the Overseas Singaporean Unit, and I have two questions. Firstly, what are the main considerations in choosing the kebayas for the exhibition? And secondly, what are your biggest challenges in setting up this exhibition? Thank you.
I guess some of the criteria used to choose the kebayas and the sarongs that we featured, pieces that were selected, were, I guess first, I think Peter and I, we started from the storyline. We needed pieces that tell the story. And so from there, we have 4 broad themes that Peter will talk about later. We went around sampling also for different collections and to see what people were willing to lend and what we have. And of course, secondly, I think what was another criteria also was, of course, for the pieces to be in good condition, because it affects the manner that it can be displayed, which was also one of the main challenges of the show, because textiles are quite fragile by nature, also very sensitive to light. So we had to work very closely with our professional cultivators at Heritage Conservation Centre, who would advise us, because of course Peter and I, our first concern would be aesthetics, to put as many things as possible on mannequins so that they would be lifelike. But sometimes, of course, we were better advised later by our conservation colleagues that certain pieces might have to be one drop, or 2 they have to be. Mainly, they did help us to present that we reach a compromise and put them in a manner that was good for the condition of the textile and the show. And 3, of course, I think we also chose them we were very concerned, as Peter has mentioned, about historical accuracy of many of the collections and the matching, especially quite some emphasis on that. Would you like to add on anything?
Yeah, I guess the other big thing was to make sure we had contemporary kebayas with sarong contemporary with their kebayas, because there are actually very big differences from decade to decade, and so we had to select very carefully for the right period. Yeah, because it's very tempting to show something and match it just for the color, but and the wrong period. And I think this was one of our careful considerations. The other thing is we wanted to show for the first time. Well, from photographs and books, we see a lot of the fronts of Moya, and in this exhibition, I'm very keen to show a lot of backs, because many of them look so nice. They were mixed scenes from the front and back.
Will there be any samples of the kebayas where visitors will be able to touch, feel the textures? I mean, I know some of them are priceless. Will there be any samples?
Perhaps I just elaborated earlier, so thanks for the question that allows me to share the information. Actually, for the education, the interactive corner right in the exhibition, we do have education, and unit has put together some pieces that will be available for touching and also for trying on. So you can actually touch how various laces feel and texture borders or different cottons that we use for the different items that you actually see on display. Because already we have some docents walking through and other visitors, and of course visitor comment is that you will see later as you walk through, you can get quite close up to the mannequins, and I guess there might be this temptation to touch, because some of them, the lace especially, is so fine. So we have anticipated the curiosity of the visitors in that sense, and we do have a special corner whereby we can touch all the various forms of fabric that we have displayed in the exhibition.
I think if we have no more questions, we'll set off for the